Before we begin, I want to extend a quick invitation to you. If you enjoy mystery stories, the kind that grab your attention from beginning to end and stay in your mind long after they're over, so subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications, because that's exactly what you'll find here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I love knowing how far these stories are going. The house in Amityville seemed too ordinary to hold any kind of history. Light paint, aligned windows, well-kept garden. Those passing by on the street saw nothing more than another quiet residence in a peaceful neighborhood in the United States. But something was wrong there. It wasn't visible. It wasn't explained. It was felt. Daniel Harper arrived at the property on a grey morning, carrying only a suitcase and a newly signed contract. He was known for buying problematic houses, properties that nobody else wanted. He renovated them, sold them, and moved on. For him, everything had a logical explanation. Leaks, old wiring, problematic neighbors. There was always a rational reason behind any strange story. That's what he believed, all the way to that house. As soon as he stepped through the door, something caught his attention. It wasn't a loud sound or a disturbing sight. It was the silence. A heavy silence, as if the room were waiting for something. Daniel stopped in the middle of the room. The floorboards creaked under his feet. Normal. The wind rustled lightly against the windows. Normal. But the air felt colder in there than it should have been. He put the suitcase down and walked slowly to the kitchen. Everything seemed too untouched. There were no signs of neglect, no accumulated dust, no cobwebs. It was as if someone had left just a few minutes ago. It must be recent, he murmured to himself. He opened one of the drawers, empty. He opened another one, also empty. Everything clean, organized. No trace of life, and at the same time, no signs of neglect. That didn't make sense. Daniel decided to ignore the unsettling feeling. He climbed the stairs, assessing the structure of the house. Each step produced a strange echo. Not the typical hollow sound of old wood, but something deeper, as if the sound lingered. At the top of the stairs, he found a long corridor. 3 doors. He opened the first one. Empty room, the second one. Another room, equally empty, but with marks on the floor. Marks as if heavy furniture had been dragged recently. He bent down, running his hand along the lines on the floor. Strange! When he stood up, he noticed something. The third door was ajar. He was certain it had been locked before. Daniel walked slowly towards her. He nudged her with his fingertips. The room was dark, even with daylight streaming in through the hallway windows. He looked for the switch. Nothing. He took a step inside, and then he listened. A low sound, almost imperceptible, like a whisper or a breath. He froze. The sound stopped. Daniel took a deep breath and tried to remain rational. Old house. Piping. Wind, he said in a low voice, as if he needed to convince himself. He left the room and closed the door firmly. He decided to go back to the room, but as he went down the stairs, he noticed something that made his body freeze completely. And luckily, it was no longer where he had left it. Now it was leaning against the wall, perfectly aligned, as if someone had carefully placed it there. Daniel stood motionless. My heart raced. He knew exactly where he had left that suitcase, in the center of the room, not leaning against something, not organized, not center. He took a step back. The house remained silent. No sound, no movement, but something was wrong, very wrong. That night he decided to stay. Not out of courage, but out of stubbornness. Daniel didn't believe in stories. He didn't believe in cursed houses. For him, everything had an explanation, and he would find it. Even though deep down, something was already beginning to doubt it. When night fell, the house changed. The sound started slowly. A snap here, a creaking sound over there. Steps? Maybe. Or perhaps the wood is just adjusting itself. Daniel remained seated on the sofa, observing his surroundings. No television, no music, just listening. At midnight, something happened. The door to the third bedroom, upstairs, it opened by itself. The sound echoed throughout the entire house. This is it. Dragged. Inevitable. Daniel did not move immediately, but his eyes were fixed on the staircase, and for the first time since he arrived, he wasn't sure if he wanted to find out the truth. The next morning, the house looked normal, silent, illuminated by the pale sunlight, almost welcoming. The kind of place that would deceive any unsuspecting visitor. Daniel remained standing in the room for a few minutes, observing the surroundings as if expecting something to repeat itself. Nothing happened. No sound, no movement. The suitcase remained leaning against the wall, exactly like the night before. He approached slowly, examining the ground around him. No marks, no sign that she had been dragged. That bothered him more than any strange noise, because he left no explanation. Daniel ran a hand over his face, took a deep breath, and tried to reorganize his thoughts. He picked up his cell phone and checked the signal. Working. Normal. That reassured him somewhat. He decided to leave the house. The Amityville neighborhood was quiet, almost static. Neatly aligned houses, clean streets, few people around. A scene too ordinary to hide any kind of mystery. But he was hiding it. He walked to the house next door, where a lady was observing the garden with meticulous attention. She looked up as soon as she noticed his presence, and it stopped. It wasn't a curious glance. It was recognition. "You bought that house," she said without asking. Daniel nodded. "I bought it yesterday. I'm Daniel." She didn't answer immediately. She just kept looking at him, as if she were assessing something beyond what was visible. "Margaret?" she finally replied. "You shouldn't have done that. Direct, without beating around the bush." Daniel gave a slight smile, trying to break the tension. "I heard the place had some history, but nothing a good renovation can't fix." Margaret did not smile. "These are not stories." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Daniel crossed his arms. What exactly happened there? The woman hesitated. He looked at the house. Then, back to him. Some people left without taking anything. Others stayed. Did they stay? No one else saw them leave. Daniel frowned. "Wasn't this investigated?" "It was," she replied dryly. "And they found nothing." Nothing. The word hung in the air. Daniel tried to maintain control of the conversation. "And you believe that?" Margaret took a step back, as if the proximity to the house was uncomfortable, even from that distance. "I believe what I saw." "And what did you see?" She didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the windows of the upper floor. Lights turning on in empty rooms, shadows where there is no one, and sometimes people looking out the windows. Daniel followed her gaze. The windows were empty, like always. "This house doesn't like to be empty," Margaret continued. "It never has." Daniel sighed, already beginning to get annoyed by the enigmatic tone. Houses don't like or dislike. There must be some practical explanation for all of this. Margaret looked at him again. "Everyone says that at the beginning." She turned away, ending the conversation without warning. Daniel stood still for a few seconds before returning home. But this time, something had changed. It was no longer just a feeling. Now there was context, historical, standards, and that made everything more real. Inside the house, Daniel decided to investigate more carefully. He grabbed a flashlight, a notepad, and began examining each room. In the living room, nothing beyond the basics. In the kitchen, the same organized emptiness. But as he climbed the stairs, he noticed something different. The hallway seemed longer. He stopped halfway. He looked back. The ladder was there. Normal. He looked ahead. The 3 doors. But the distance between them seemed greater than before. "Impression," he murmured. Even so, he noted it down. He opened the first door again. Nothing. The second one. The marks on the ground were deeper, as if something had been dragged around during the night. Daniel knelt down again. This time he noticed something new. The markings were not random. They formed a pattern, direction. They carried it all the way to the wall. but there was nothing there. He tapped lightly with his knuckles. "I am a dad." Unlike the rest of the wall, Daniel narrowed his eyes. Before I could investigate further, a sound came from the hallway. Steps, clearly steps, boards, heavy. He got up quickly and left the room. The hallway was empty. But the third quarter, the door was open again. More than before, wide open. Daniel stood motionless. The air turned cold again, colder than the day before. And then, one detail. The doorknob began to turn slowly, alone. Daniel didn't run. He didn't scream. He simply observed. Because, at that moment, he realized something that changed everything, that wasn't just happening with the house. I was reacting to him. Late in the afternoon, Daniel decided to research the property's history. He turned on his laptop and started searching for old records. It took longer than I expected. Limited information, few records, as if someone had erased parts of history. But he found something. A name. Evelyn Carter. Last registered owner. Missing, without explanation, without a body, no clues, just disappeared. Daniel stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then, slowly, he raised his gaze, and he looked at the stairs. The house was silent again. But now he knew. That wasn't random. It never was. That night, Daniel didn't try to pretend that everything was under control. He prepared himself. He left all the lights on, positioned his charging phone next to the sofa, and kept the flashlight within reach. For the first time since arriving, he wasn't there as an investor, but as someone trying to understand something that didn't obey the normal rules. The house seemed to be watching. Silence was no longer neutral. It was loaded. Minutes dragged on until the first sound emerged. A sharp impact from the floor above. Daniel stood up immediately. Another sound. Drag. This is it. Heavy. Exactly like the marks he had seen in the room. He climbed the stairs without hesitation, but with controlled steps. Each step creaked louder than usual, as if to announce his presence. When he reached the hallway, he stopped. All 3 doors were open. All 3. Before, there was only one. Now, all of them. The air was freezing. Much more than the night before. Daniel took a deep breath and entered the second room, the one with the marks on the floor. The atmosphere was different. The scratch pattern was now more evident, deeper. And this time, it didn't end at the wall. It continued. He was crossing, as if something had been pulled inside her. Daniel ran his hand over the surface. Free, Dura. But the hollow sound remained. Without thinking much, he pushed harder. Nothing. But the moment he withdrew his hand, he listened again. On the other side, a light touch as an answer. Daniel slowly backed away. That was no longer just strange, it was interaction. Before he could react, a loud bang echoed down the hallway. The door to the third bedroom slammed shut. Daniel turned around immediately. The sound reverberated throughout the house. He walked over there, now no longer trying to hide his fear. Each step was heavier, more aware. When he reached the door, he noticed something new. There were marks inside, as if fingernails had scratched the wood, trying to get out. Daniel pushed the door open. This time she opened it completely. The room remained dark, but there was something different. A smell. Iron. A faint metallic smell in the air. He illuminated the room with the flashlight. Nothing on the ground, nothing on the walls, nothing on the ceiling. But by moving the light slowly, something appeared for a second. A silhouette. I don't sing. Stop. Property. Daniel froze. He pointed the flashlight directly at her. Nothing. The corner was empty, but he was sure. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a reflection. It was something. A sound came from behind him. Very close. Breathing. Daniel turned around quickly. Nothing. But the sound didn't stop this time. He was there. Around. As if it was circulating. As if, or were looking for. Daniel stepped back into the hallway. The air seemed heavier with each passing second. Then all the lights in the house went out. all at once. Total darkness. Silence returned for a brief second, and then steps, coming from all sides, running, going up, going down, around him. Daniel quickly turned on the flashlight. The beam of light trembled in his hands. "Is anyone here?" he said firmly, or trying to be. No response. But the footsteps stopped. Suddenly, absolute silence. And then a whisper. "You shouldn't have come back." In his ear. Daniel twisted his body violently. Nothing but an empty hallway, more to the voice. It was clear, real, and it didn't seem far off. It seemed too close, as if I were inside the house, or worse, inside it. Daniel went down the stairs quickly, now without trying to remain calm. Upon entering the room, he found something that made his blood run cold. Oh, notebook. Connected. The screen is lit, but he was certain he had closed it. New information appeared on the screen. Something that wasn't there before. An old record. A photo. A woman standing in front of the house. Old, worn out, but visible. Daniel approached slowly. The name below the image, Evelyn Carter. He swallowed hard. But that wasn't what made him back down. It was the detail. The second-floor window. In the photo. Someone was watching. A figure. Distant, almost invisible, but clearly there. And the worst part. The silhouette looked like... Daniel took a step back. Unable to take their eyes off the screen. The house remained silent, as if he were waiting, observing, patient. And at that moment, Daniel understood one thing. He wasn't investigating the house. The house was investigating him. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He remained seated, staring at the laptop screen until dawn, as if looking away might make that image disappear. Or worse, change. But she was still there. A photo antigua. Evelyn Carter stood in front of the house, and in the window, that figure, he, or something that resembled it. When the sun finally came out, Daniel made a decision. He needed to get out of there for a few hours, not to run away, but to find answers outside the home. The local police station was small, almost forgotten by time, the kind of place where old stories weren't archived, only kept in the memories of those who were still there. The officer who attended to him seemed to already know the reason for the visit. "The house," he said, even before Daniel could explain. Daniel nodded. "I need information about a woman. Evelyn Carter." The man sighed, as if that name carried a familiar weight. "You bought the place, didn't you?" "I bought." The officer stared at him for a few seconds. "Listen carefully. Not everything is in official records." Daniel crossed his arms, impatient. "What happened to her?" The police officer leaned slightly over the table. She wasn't the first. That changed the tone of the conversation immediately. "How many?" "At least 5 disappearances linked to that house, over the course of decades." Daniel felt his stomach churn. "And they never found anything?" "Never," the man replied. "No signs of invasion, no fighting, no bodies. They just disappeared." "And nobody investigated further?" The police officer let out a slight, humorless laugh. "They investigated as far as they could. Then they stopped trying to explain." Daniel was silent for a moment. "Yeah, Evelyn. That was the last one. She lived alone. Neighbors reported lights left on for days after her disappearance, and shadows in the windows. Same things. Exactly the same." Daniel took a deep breath. "And that's how the case was closed." "It was forgotten like that," the policeman corrected. Upon leaving the police station, Daniel realized he was no longer dealing with an isolated incident. It was a pattern, repeated, consistent, and now he was a part of it. Back in the neighborhood, he met Margaret again. This time, she wasn't tending the garden. "I was waiting." "You went looking for answers," she said. Daniel did not deny it. 5 people disappeared in that house. Margaret nodded slowly. "Do you still think it's just old infrastructure?" Daniel did not answer. She took a step closer. There are things you still haven't realized. Like what? Margaret discreetly pointed towards the house. It doesn't affect everyone in the same way. That made Daniel frown. Like this? Some people hear sounds, others see things, but there are different cases. Different how? She hesitated before answering. People who are starting to change. Daniel felt a shiver run down his spine. To change. Routine, behavior, memory. Are you saying that? I'm saying that some people don't disappear immediately. The silence between them grew heavy. And what happens to them? Daniel asked. Margaret kept her gaze fixed on him. They stay. That thought lingered in Daniel's mind as he walked back inside the house, but this time he came in with a different perspective. It wasn't just a place, it was a system. Something that reacted, chose, influenced, and perhaps it transformed. Inside the house, he decided to test something. He picked up his cell phone and started recording a video. He went up the stairs, corridor, 3 doors. Everything seems normal. But when looking at the phone screen, something was wrong. The image showed the corridor, longer than it actually was, the furthest doors, and for a second, a 4th door, deep down, where nothing should exist. Daniel immediately put his cell phone down. He looked directly at her. Nothing, only 3 doors. He picked up the device again. The 4th door was there, closed, dark, property. Daniel felt his heart race. That wasn't my imagination. It was another layer, another version of the house. He took a step forward. The image on the cell phone was shaking slightly. Another step. The 4th door seemed closer, but when he took his eyes off the screen, nothing changed in the real world. Or at least, that's what it seemed like. A noise coming from downstairs interrupted everything. Glass breaking. Daniel went down quickly. The living room window was open. The glass shattered on the floor, but there were no signs of intrusion, no footprints, no external movement, just the wind coming in, and along with him, a sound, low, almost imperceptible, like multiple voices speaking at the same time. Daniel stood still, trying to make it clearer, but the words were not clear. They were fragments, overlapping whispers, and then, for a moment, one phrase stood out. It has already begun. Daniel slowly backed away. The cell phone was still in his hand, recording. He looked at the screen, and what he saw made his body completely freeze. In the video, he was not alone. Behind him, stopped, property. There was someone. And at that moment, all the pieces began to fall into place in a disturbing way. The house didn't just show things. She created versions. It altered perceptions. It mixed reality and impossibility. And worse, it was bringing something closer and closer. Daniel didn't have the courage to look back immediately. The cell phone was still in his hand, clearly displaying the image of someone standing just inches from him. A solid presence, silent, impossible to ignore. But as she slowly turned her body, there was nobody there. The room was empty. The glass was still scattered across the floor. The wind was still blowing through the broken window, and silence returned. Daniel swallowed hard and turned his eyes back to the screen. The figure was still there, property, right behind him. But now, it's clearer. She was a woman, pale face, deep-set eyes, and her head was slightly tilted as if she were observing him with curiosity. Daniel turned off his cell phone with a sudden movement, rapid breathing, trying to regain control. But something inside him already knew. That was no longer just a manifestation of the house. It was someone, or something, that was stuck there. He went up the stairs again, this time without hesitation, non-stop. The hallway seemed narrower, the walls closer together, and the air heavier. Daniel picked up his cell phone again. He turned on the camera, and he looked through the screen. The 4th door was there, closer than before, as if he were waiting. He took another step, and another, until without realizing exactly when, he was no longer in the same hallway. The 3 doors had disappeared. Now there was only one, the 4th, in front of him, real, specifically. Daniel froze. He lowered his phone slowly, and when he raised his eyes, she was still there. That was no longer an illusion. The house had changed. Or him. The doorknob started turning on its own, this time without hesitation. No slowdown, as if someone on the other side had finally decided to open up. The door opened. A room, but not like the others. The walls were marked, deep scratches, overlapping layers of marks, as if several people had tried to escape from there over time. The ground was uneven, worn out, and in the center, a chair, facing the door. Daniel took a step inside. The air was freezing, much more so than anywhere else in the house. And then he saw, sitting in the chair, the woman in the photo, Evelyn Carter, exactly as pictured. Pale face, eyes fixed, without blinking. She didn't look dead, but it didn't seem alive either. Daniel didn't speak. It didn't happen. He just stayed there, observing, and then, slowly, she raised her head, and he stared at him. Her eyes were expressionless, but there was something about them, recognition. "You took your time," she said. The voice was low, dry, as if it hadn't been used in a long time. Daniel felt his whole body freeze. You are—" "No," she interrupted. "I'm not." The answer didn't make sense, but at the same time, it did. Daniel took a step back, but the door had disappeared. The room was now locked, no way out. "What is this place?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "It's not a place." The silence that followed was suffocating. "So what is it?" It took her a few seconds to respond. "It's an intermission." Daniel frowned. "Interval between what?" She smiled. For the first time, and that was worse than anything else. Between going and staying. The air seemed to disappear from the room. Daniel tried to move, but his body didn't respond in the same way. Heavy, this is it, as if it were being pulled. "The people who disappeared," he began. "They didn't disappear," Evelyn said. "They were kept." "By whom?" She didn't answer immediately. He just looked around, as if the answer itself were on the walls. "Around the house," Daniel murmured. Evelyn turned her gaze to him. "No." That made everything worse. "So by whom?" She slowly stood up from the chair. Every move was wrong, misaligned, as if the body didn't fully obey. And then she said, "Because of what he uses at home." The silence that followed was absolute. Daniel felt his heart beat faster. "And what is that?" Evelyn took a step towards him. "You." Daniel froze. "That doesn't make sense." "Not yet," she replied. Another step, closer. "But it will happen." Daniel tried to retreat again, but there was nowhere to go. "I saw you. In the window. In that photo," he said, trying to remain rational. "That wasn't possible." Evelyn stopped just inches from him. "Era." "How?" She slowly raised her hand, and she pointed at him. "Because you were already here." The world seemed to tilt. Daniel shook his head. "That's impossible." "That's what I said too," she replied. And then something happened. The environment began to distort. The walls vibrated. The scratches began to move, as if they were recent, as if they were being made at that very moment. Daniel looked at his own hands. There were marks on them. Scratches. Recent, as if he had tried to escape from somewhere, and I didn't remember. He looked at Evelyn. "What's happening to me?" She stared at him with a disturbing calmness. "You didn't go inside the house, Daniel." The silence weighed heavily. She moved even closer, and he whispered, "You were chosen by her, long before you arrived here." Daniel felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Reality began to fail. Fragmented memories emerged, strange sensations, seen before. Moments that didn't make sense. Now they do. And then he understood, or he began to understand. The house wasn't the beginning, it was only the means. And at that moment, everything changed, irreversibly. Daniel fell to his knees. The room, or whatever that place was, seemed to pulse around him. The walls were no longer static. The scratches deepened slowly, as if being made by invisible hands at that very moment. He looked at his own hands again. The marks were there, recent, painful, real. "No," she murmured, trying to organize her thoughts. "This can't be happening." But it was. Evelyn remained standing in front of him, observing him without any hurry, like someone who had seen that reaction before. Often. "You start to remember little by little," she said. Daniel looked up quickly. "Remember what?" She didn't answer immediately. She simply turned and walked slowly around the room, running her fingers over the marks on the walls. "Everyone asks the same questions," she continued. "Everyone thinks they're still at the beginning." Daniel stood up with difficulty. "I'm just starting out." Evelyn stopped. He turned slowly. "No." The word was blunt, definitive, and this struck Daniel more powerfully than any sound or sight. "So what am I?" he asked, his voice lower now. She stared at him for a few seconds. "You're still deciding." The room shook slightly. A sound echoed, deep, like something moving within the very structure of the house. Daniel looked around. What was that? Evelyn did not respond, but his gaze changed. For the first time, there was tension. "He noticed," she said. "Who?" But Daniel already knew he wouldn't like that answer. The ground vibrated again, stronger. The walls began to crack. "Don't break it." Cracking, as if something were trying to break through them. Daniel instinctively recoiled. "Is this part of it too?" he asked, trying to maintain composure. "No," Evelyn replied, this time more quickly. "It happens when you start to understand." The air grew heavier, difficult to breathe. Daniel put his hand to his chest. "Understand what?" Evelyn took a step towards him. "That you're not just someone trapped here." Another sound, closer, like an impact coming from inside the walls. "Then what am I?" Daniel insisted. She stopped right in front of him. "You're part of this now." The silence was broken by a loud crack. A crack opened up in the wall next to them, and something moved inside. It wasn't a clear method, not even human, but he was alive, observing. Daniel took a step back, his body reacting before his mind. "This? What is this?" Evelyn kept her eyes fixed on the crack. "That's what keeps everyone here." The crack grew slowly, as if it were being forced from the inside out. Daniel felt his heart race uncontrollably. "Can he get out?" "Not completely," she replied. "But you can reach it." The sentence hung in the air for a second. Enough time for Daniel to understand what that meant. Before he could react, something slid through the crack. Fast, violent, a dark, elongated shape, almost like an arm. It froze in mid-air for a moment, and then it moved in his direction. Daniel threw himself to the side. The impact hit the ground hard, leaving a deep mark in the wood. He crawled away, trying to catch his breath. "He wants you," Evelyn said. Daniel looked at her, startled. "Why?" It took her a second to answer. "Because you're closer." Another attack. The dark shape advanced again, this time faster. Daniel Corot, without direction, just trying to get away. But the room began to distort. The walls lengthened, space became distorted, and then, suddenly, he was no longer in the same place. Daniel fell to the floor of the room, back, or at least, it seemed that way. The window was still broken, the wind was still blowing in, but there was something different. The house was alive, not just silent, active. He stood up quickly, looking around. "This isn't over," he murmured, and it really wasn't over. Footsteps echoed upstairs, more than one, many, running, stopping, changing direction, as if multiple presences were moving at the same time. Daniel slowly backed away. "No, no." Then he listened. Voices, different, overlapping. But now, it's clearer. Stay, don't go out, not yet. Times. He covered his ears, but it was no use. The voices were not coming from the surroundings. They came from within. Daniel fell to his knees again. Stop. Stop it. The memories began to surface, fragmented, quick. Him entering the house more than once, going up the stairs, repeatedly, opening the third door, several times, and always arriving at that room, the fourth door, always, like a cycle. Daniel opened his eyes abruptly. "I've been through this before," she whispered. Silence returned for a moment, heavy, confirmed. He looked at the staircase, and then he realized something even worse. The house wasn't changing, he was. His reflection in the broken glass caught his attention. Daniel approached slowly, and he saw. For a second, his face wasn't exactly the same. Something was different. Paler, more empty, more similar to Evelyn's. He retreated immediately. Breathing is failing. No, but deep down, he already knew. The consequences were not only external, they weren't just sounds, sights, or presences. The house didn't just want to imprison people, I wanted to transform, and he was already in the process. Upstairs, a door slowly opened. Alone. The sound echoed throughout the entire house. Daniel closed his eyes for a second, knowing exactly which door it was, the fourth, and this time, she wasn't expecting it. She was calling. Daniel remained kneeling for a few seconds, trying to control his breathing. The sound of the door upstairs still echoed in his mind, but something had changed. This time, fear was no longer paralyzing. It was different, that's clearer, more targeted. He stood up slowly. The reflection in the glass still bothered him, but now something else was dominating his thoughts. Standards, repetitions, cycles. "I've been through this several times," she said in a low voice. The fragmented memories returned, but now with more consistency. He was going up the stairs, opening doors, entering that room, always reaching out to Evelyn, always hearing the same things, and always forgetting afterwards. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. "So that's it," he murmured. "The house not only imprisons, it resets." The conclusion brought something unexpected. Control. If that was a cycle, so maybe there was a way to break it. He opened his eyes again. This time he couldn't avoid the reflex. He approached the broken glass. He examined every detail of his own face. Yes, there were changes. But it was still him. There was still consciousness. "There's still time," he said to himself. The phrase was not one of hope. It was a decision. Daniel started acting differently. He didn't run straight to the stairs. He did not react to the sound. On the contrary, he stood still, observing, waiting. And that's when he realized something fundamental. The house reacted to his actions. Not just presence, but it's a matter of choice. When he ran, the sounds grew louder. When he hesitated, the doors appeared. When he investigated, something would give him an answer. But now, he did nothing. And what happened was silence. A silence deeper than before, almost unstable, as if the house didn't know how to react. Daniel took a deep breath. So this is how you operate. He started walking around the house, slowly, no rush, without reacting to the sounds that began to emerge again. Footsteps upstairs, whispers in the walls, cracking sounds on the floor. None of that stopped him. None of that made him speed up. He continued, constant, controlled, and little by little the sounds started to cut out, like an interference, irregular, disorganized. When he reached the stairs, he stopped. He looked up. He knew what to expect. But this time, I wouldn't take the same path again. It went up. But upon reaching the hallway, he didn't look at the doors, not even for the end. He didn't even look for the fourth one. He did something different. He leaned his hand against the wall, exactly where the marks were before. He closed his eyes, and he remained silent for a few seconds. Nothing happened. But then, a feeling, subtle like a vibration. The wall was not just a structure, it was a passage. Daniel slowly opened his eyes. "It's not about going to her," he murmured. He took a step back. He completely ignored the doors, and for the first time, he tried to break the mold. The household reacted immediately. A loud sound echoed. All three doors opened at the same time. The hallway seemed to stretch out again. The fourth door appeared in the background, clearer than ever, closer, almost irresistible. But Daniel didn't look directly at her. He kept his focus on the wall, in the feeling, in what was outside the norm. "You want me to go there?" he said in a firm voice. The air grew heavier. The whispers began again, more intense. "Go. Deadline. It's the only way." Daniel closed his eyes tightly. "No," the response echoed. And at that moment, everything stopped, completely. Absolute silence, no sound, no movement, no pressure, as if the house had locked up. Daniel opened his eyes, and he saw the fourth door disappearing, slowly falling apart, as if it had never existed. He took a deep breath. My heart was still racing, but now there was something new, clarity. "It's not about going in," he said. "It's about refusing." But the victory was short-lived. A deep sound echoed again, stronger than before. The walls began to shake, more violently. The cracks have returned, more intense, and this time, not just one, several, along the corridor. Something was reacting, something bigger, older, more aware. Daniel retreated. "So this is what you do when you lose control." One of the cracks opened up forcefully, and that presence returned, closer, more defined, more real. But Daniel didn't run, not this time. He stood still, observing, even with the fear growing again, even with my instincts screaming at me to run away. "You need me to follow the path," he said, "because that's how you keep me here." The dark shape moved inside the crack, more aggressive, more unstable, but I'm not going to follow anymore. The impact came again, violent, but Daniel did not back down as much as before. He kept his gaze fixed, even trembling, even with the fear, because now he understood. That wasn't just about survival. It was a choice, and each choice changed the reaction of the house. The hallway began to collapse slowly. The doors disappeared. The walls became deformed. And for a moment, Daniel saw something more. Not the house, but what was behind it. An empty space, dark, without form, endless, and inside it, movement. Much more than just a single presence. Much more than he imagined. Daniel took a step back, heavy breathing. "So, it's not just you?" The sound responded, low, deep, like something awakening. And at that moment, Daniel understood something else. He wasn't just trying to leave. He was facing something he didn't want to lose. Because somehow, he was already part of that. But for the first time since he entered that house, he wasn't just reacting, he was resisting. The hallway no longer existed, at least not in the way Daniel knew it. The walls were fragmented, as if the house were being dismantled from the inside. Spaces appeared where they shouldn't exist, while others disappeared without a trace. But in the midst of that chaos, Daniel remained standing, breathing with difficulty but conscious, present. He no longer tried to understand the house as a physical place. Now he saw what it really was. A mechanism, a cycle, a trap designed to always lead to the same point. The fourth door. And that's when he realized something crucial. Even without looking directly, he knew. She was coming back. The fourth door. He always came back, but this time he didn't back down. It didn't move forward immediately either. He observed. He waited. And then he saw. She didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was built. Small fragments of the environment were reorganizing themselves. Lines were lining up, shadows adjusted themselves, as if reality itself were bent to form that passage. "So that's how you do it," Daniel murmured. Understanding brought something important: predictability. And predictability could be broken. He started walking, but not towards the door, around, exploring unstable space. Each step revealed something new, marks on the walls that weren't there before, sounds that seemed to echo from places too distant to exist inside a house. And then he found something, a different brand, not like the others, deeper, more focused, as if it had been done intentionally. Daniel approached slowly. He ran his hand over the surface. And at that moment, a memory returned. Clara, strong, himself, but scratching that wall, desperate, trying to forge a path, trying to get out where there was no way out. Daniel took a step back, breathing faster. I've already tried that. And it failed. It always failed, because I was trying to leave, following the house rules. He looked around again. The fourth door was now almost completely formed, closer, more realistic, more convincing than ever. And along with her, the voices have returned, stronger, more organized. Now, deadline, it's ready. Daniel closed his eyes for a second, not to run away, but something to think about. If that door was the end of the cycle, so everything led to her. And everything that led to her, that was exactly what the house wanted. He opened his eyes, and he made a decision, different from all the previous ones. He walked, direct, without hesitation, towards the fourth door. The voices grew louder, almost celebrating. The environment began to stabilize, as if everything were finally returning to normal. The house was cooperating, making things easier, guiding, and this confirmed what he already suspected. Do you want me to come in? The door was now before him, fully formed, solid, silent, waiting. Daniel raised his hand. He held the doorknob, and for a brief moment he remained motionless, taking a deep breath. So that's what you do, she said quietly. You make it seem inevitable. The voices have ceased, as if they had been waiting for that moment, the final decision. But Daniel didn't open the door. He slowly released the doorknob, and he did something unexpected. He rested his forehead against the wood. He closed his eyes, and he remained completely still. No action, no reaction, no immediate choice. And that's when it happened. The door started to malfunction. Small cracks appeared on the surface, almost invisible. But they were there. Daniel slowly opened his eyes. You can't force me, she murmured. The environment responded, violent. The walls started shaking again, the ground warped, and the deep sound returned, stronger than ever. But this time, Daniel did not back down. He stepped away from the door, with his back to her, something he had never done before. Never. The effect was immediate. The door began to fall apart, faster, more unstable. The voices returned, but now disorganized, confused. No. Wait. Times. Daniel took another step back, without looking, without hesitation. I'm not going to end this the way you want. The surrounding space began to collapse, but not like before. Now it seemed out of control, without direction, no pattern, and in the midst of that collapse, something emerged, not from a crack, but from space itself, the presence, more complete, more visible, still without a defined form, but undeniably there, observing, reacting. Daniel stopped, breathing heavily, but firm. So, now you show up. The silence that followed was unlike any other. It wasn't empty. He was aware, and at that moment, Daniel understood. The climax wouldn't be about escaping, not even about surviving. It would be about confrontation, direct, no cycles, no doors, no repetitions. The house could no longer hide what was really behind it. And now, there was no going back. The presence had no defined form, but it was there. The space around Daniel seemed to curve, as if that thing distorted everything around it simply by existing. The air became heavy, almost impossible to breathe, and the silence was no longer an absence of sound. It was pressure. Daniel remained motionless. This time, there was no door. There was no hallway. There was no house. Just him. And that. "So it's you," Daniel said, his voice firm despite the evident fear. No direct answer, but the environment reacted. Invisible ripples crossed the space, as if something were approaching without actually moving. Daniel did not back down. "You create the cycles," he continued. "You make people relive everything until it breaks." A pause. And then, for the first time, something responded, not with words, but with pictures. Memories surfaced around him like fragments projected into the void. People, different, at different times, entering the house, exploring, resisting, and in the end, always giving in, always opening the door, always choosing the path that seemed inevitable. Daniel observed everything without looking away. "You don't arrest anyone," he said slowly. "You convince." The images flickered, unstable, as if the statement had hit upon something essential. "You don't force, you manipulate." The space reacted with even greater intensity. The body of the presence began to contract, expand, unstable. Daniel stepped forward, even with my instinct screaming at me to stop. And when someone understands that, another step. You lose control. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, dangerous. And then the reaction came, violent. Space collapsed around him. The memories have transformed into aggressive distortions. Faces emerged, voices echoed. "You can't leave." "Nobody leaves. You're going to stay." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. He took a deep breath, and he replied, "I'm not going to play your game." The impact was immediate. The presence has progressed, this time, without subtlety, without manipulation, a direct force, brutal. Daniel was thrown backward, falling hard. The ground seemed unstable, almost liquid. But he got up, even trembling, even with a heavy body. "That's what you do when you can't control it," he said with difficulty. "You try to force it." The presence drew closer. Now it's clearer, denser, almost human, but distorted. "Wrong. You need me to make the wrong choice," Daniel continued. "Because without that, you can't keep me." The space vibrated intensely, like an angry response. But there was something new there. Instability. Cracks. Daniel looked around, and he realized the environment was no longer completely under his control. There were flaws, small but real. "You're not as strong as you seem," he said. "One more step forward." "It depends on who comes in." The presence receded, minimally, but he backed down, and that was all Daniel needed. He moved forward, this time without hesitation, without paralyzing fear, just a decision. "You don't create fear," he said. "You use fear." Another step. "You don't create the cycle," he continued. "You repeat what we accept." The presence began to fragment, as if each word broke part of its structure, and "I won't accept it anymore." The silence fell like a shock, total, and then everything started to fall apart. Not like before, not chaotic, but dissolving, like something that could no longer sustain itself. The presence tried to react. "It will condense, it will be rebuilt," but I couldn't. The forms were failing, the edges were crumbling. "You can't exist without it," Daniel said, now more firmly. "Without the cycle, without repetition, without the wrong choice." He stopped in front of it, just a few steps away, and for the first time, the presence seemed smaller, not physically, but less dominant, less absolute. Daniel raised his hand, not for playing, but as a final gesture. He finished. And then silence, total, deep, definitive. For a moment, everything disappeared, homeless, no presence, no space, no time, just empty. And then Daniel opened his eyes. He was in the room. The window is still broken. Daylight is streaming in. The light wind. Everything seemingly normal. But there was something different. something subtle, something only he would notice. The silence. Now. It was truly empty. Daniel remained motionless in the center of the room for several minutes. The body still carried the tension of what had happened, but the atmosphere did not. The house was different, no longer silently oppressive, just empty. He took a deep breath. For the first time since he arrived, the air felt light, natural, without that constant weight that pressed down on his thoughts. Daniel walked slowly to the broken window. He looked outside. The neighborhood remained the same, calm, intact, as if nothing had happened. But for him, everything had changed. He ran his hand over his face, trying to organize his memories. Unlike before, they were not fragmented. Now it all made sense. The cycle, repetitions, the choices, everything was clear. He had not been just a victim. At some point, I had participated in that, without even realizing it, even without remembering. But now, I remembered. And that made all the difference. Daniel stepped away from the window and began walking around the house. Each room, every detail. As if seeing everything for the first time, the kitchen, empty, normal, without any sign of interference. The room, just one room, no echoes, without distortions. He went up the stairs, slowly, watching every step. The hallway was there, exactly as it should be. 3 doors, only 3, no fourth, no distortion. Daniel stopped in front of the 3rd door, the same one that always led back to the beginning of everything. He stood there for a few seconds, taking a deep breath. And then it opened. The room was empty, completely empty. No marks, no scratches, no signs of anything out of the ordinary. Daniel entered. He took a few steps. He looked around. Nothing. No trace of Evelyn. No presence. No strange sensations. But this did not bring immediate relief. It brought reflection. He went back into the hallway. He went down the stairs, and he stopped in the room again. The silence continued, consistent, real. Hours passed. Daniel did not leave the house, not yet. He needed to be sure. I needed to understand if it was truly over, or if it was just another layer of the cycle. But the more time passed, it became clearer. There was no further response from the house, no reaction, no attempt to influence. Nothing. Late in the afternoon, he made a decision. He grabbed his suitcase, the same one that had moved on its own days before. Now, exactly where he left her, without interference, no mystery, just an object. Daniel walked to the exit door. He stopped with his hand on the doorknob. He looked back, to the house, and for a moment, there was doubt. Not fear, but respect, based on what that place had been like, because of what he faced there, and for what it almost became. He opened the door. It went out, and he closed it behind him. No rush. Without hesitation. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. Broader. It's as if the world has recovered something that was previously suppressed. Daniel took a few steps away from the house, and then it stopped. He turned around. He looked again. The residence seemed completely ordinary, without any sign of what had been inside. Margaret watched from a distance, like before, but this time she didn't seem surprised. Daniel walked over to her. "It's over," he said. She stared at him for a few seconds, as if he were evaluating not just the answer, but him as well. "Are you sure?" he asked. Daniel thought for a moment, and then he nodded. "I have." Margaret looked at the house, then back to him. "You left feeling different." Daniel did not deny it. "I needed to." She didn't answer. But for the first time, there was something different in his expression. It wasn't fear, not even suspicion. It was understanding. Daniel left the neighborhood at nightfall, without looking back again, without feeling the need, because this time, he knew there was nothing else there waiting for him. But even so, something remained, not at home, but in it, a conscience, a memory, a silent certainty. Some things, they don't disappear completely. They just stop controlling it. Stories like Daniel's don't end when the door closes. They continue. In a quieter way, more subtle, closer to reality than we'd like to admit. What he faced in that house was not just a presence. It wasn't just something supernatural. It was a pattern, a cycle, something that didn't need walls to exist. The house only amplified it. It made it visible. Something that often goes unnoticed outside of that environment. How many times has someone found themselves trapped in situations that seemed to repeat themselves? The same mistakes, the same choices, the same paths, even when the ending was already known. The difference is that most of the time, there is no house. There are no doors that multiply. There is no visible presence manipulating everything. But the mechanism, it's the same. Daniel's story makes one thing clear. Not every cycle is imposed. Many are accepted, repeated, fed, without anyone realizing it. And that's precisely what makes it all so dangerous. Because that which is not recognized, it cannot be interrupted. Daniel was only able to leave when he understood. Not when he fought, not when he resisted, but when he saw. He realized it wasn't just about escaping. It was about not continuing to choose the same path. And maybe this might be the most uncomfortable part of the whole story, because this raises an inevitable question. How many doors exist in real life that look different? But do they all lead to the exact same place? How many decisions are made believing that this time it will be different, when in fact nothing has changed? The house was testing this in an extreme way, in a way that is impossible to ignore. But outside of it, this happens in silence, without warning. No visible distortion, and that's why most people never realize it. The real danger was never their presence, not the house, not even what was hidden inside. The real danger, it was repetition without awareness, and contrary to what it seems, it doesn't end when the story ends. Because cycles don't need specific places, they follow people. They adapt, they disguise themselves, until they're recognized. Daniel left the house, but it didn't turn out the same. He took with him something more important than survival. It brought understanding, and that's what really broke the cycle. Perhaps that's what differentiates those who leave from those who never succeed. It's not strength, it's not luck, it's no coincidence, it's perception. Because in the end, the question is not about what exists in the shadows, but regarding what is repeated, even when the light is on. And would you be able to recognize the cycle before entering it again if you've made it this far? So you've already realized that this story isn't just about a house, it's not just about a mystery, and it's definitely not just about something supernatural. It's about choices regarding patterns, and it's about something that many people experience without realizing it. Because in the end, what happened to Daniel may seem distant, but the feeling of being trapped in something that repeats itself, this is true, much more common than it seems. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in his place, would you have done something differently? Or do you think that at some point you too would fall into the cycle? There's an important detail that many people ignore. It's not always easy to realize when we're repeating the same steps. Sometimes everything seems new, different, but deep down, the outcome is already written, and that's why stories like this stay in your mind, because they don't end when the video ends. They continue in the way you begin to view your own decisions. Now tell me in the comments, do you believe that Daniel really broke the cycle? Or do you think it could come back in another form? I really want to read your opinion. And if you like stories like this, profound mysteries, mind-bending stories that leave you thinking long after they're over, so take advantage now. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you're watching from. This greatly helps the channel to continue bringing you increasingly intense stories. And before I leave, keep this in mind. Not all labyrinths have walls, not all prisons have doors, and not every cycle. It's easy to see. See you in the next story.